Namaskar, this is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Xi Jinping wants to be India's friend. No, this is not an April Fool's joke. The Chinese president has written a letter to the Indian president where he says the dragon and the elephant should tango. We'll decode this change of heart and discuss the strategy behind the letter. It comes just before Trump's tariffs kick in. Countries across the world are bracing for impact and markets have crashed. Meanwhile, consumers are boycotting American goods. This is hurting American companies, but can it change American policy? We'll discuss that. Also, why Vladimir Putin is ramping up his military amid American-led peace talks. Why China has launched major drills around Taiwan. Why Egypt is deploying its forces in the Sinai Peninsula. And why Israel is complaining about this. What's the new British report that talks about Hindu extremism and why it's being challenged? What is artificial superintelligence? Why does Harvard University, why does it need $9 billion in government funding? And why the Netflix show Adolescence has triggered a global conversation. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Russia condemns Donald Trump's ultimatum to Iran, warns that striking Tehran's nuclear infrastructure would have catastrophic consequences. Trump has threatened to bomb Iran if it does not agree to a new nuclear deal. The Kremlin has offered to mediate between Washington and Tehran. In January, Russia signed a strategic partnership treaty with Iran. Georgia passes a US-style foreign agents bill. The new bill replaces the one adopted last year, which had triggered mass protests. But critics say the new legislation is also prone to abuse. Georgia has been in political turmoil since its October election, which was rejected by the pro-Western opposition amid claims of rigging. The Democratic Party sues the Donald Trump administration over its attempt to change the election system. This includes requiring citizenship proof to register to vote and limiting mail-in ballot counting. Trump is yet to acknowledge his defeat in the 2020 presidential election. He has often questioned the integrity of the US electoral system. Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds talks with Chile's president in New Delhi. The two leaders discuss boosting bilateral ties across various sectors. Earlier today, the Chilean president visited Mahatma Gandhi's memorial in Rajghat. This is his first state visit to India. And a gas pipeline leak sparks a massive fire near Malaysia's capital. More than 100 people have been injured and several homes have been damaged. The blaze was visible from kilometers away. The leak occurred in a gas pipeline belonging to the state-run energy firm Petronas. One of the most basic tenets of diplomacy is adaptability. You need to be flexible to respond to evolving challenges. And right now, China is showing dramatic flexibility. It has reached out to India a day before Trump's tariffs kick in, a day before the deadline. Beijing is knocking on New Delhi's door. And not through some embassy or foreign ministry official. The outreach is from the president himself, Chinese President Xi Jinping. He has written a letter to his Indian counterpart, President Draupadi Murmu, ostensibly to celebrate bilateral ties. India and China mark 75 years of diplomatic ties today, so this could pass off as diplomatic courtesy. And yet it's more than that, because this is China, whose troops attacked Indian forces at the border and whose leaders challenge Indian sovereignty in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. When they extend diplomatic courtesies, it merits closer examination. So let's look at Xi Jinping's letter. He has called India and China, and I'm quoting, ancient civilizations and pillars of the global south. And then he speaks of a dragon-elephant tango. China, as you would know, is called the dragon, and the elephant symbolizes India. They've been locked in a border standoff for years. They were locked until last year. But President Xi Jinping now wants them to tango. What explains this complete shift in approach? This is basically China making a strategic calculation. They need markets to supply their goods and to ramp up exports. And they need this urgently to put their economy back on track, the Chinese economy, and India could prove to be that market. Now more than ever, because the US market could slip from China's grasp. Trump is imposing restrictions that could deal a blow to Chinese businesses, and India could soften that blow. That is why Xi Jinping wants to repair the relationship. He said India and China should boost trust. They should deepen ties and ensure stability. And what is India's response? Well, caution and restraint for now. President Murmu wrote back to Xi Jinping she has welcomed the outreach, and that's that. As of now, there is no sign of a major policy shift. And it makes sense to exercise abundant caution. Look at our recent history. 4 years of border standoff, and finally a thaw last year. Prime Minister Modi and President Xi met in Russia on the sidelines of the BRICS summit. That engagement raised expectations. Such meetings tend to pave the way for resumption of normal ties. And we seem to be heading in that direction. Last month, Prime Minister Modi spoke about ties with China. He appeared on the Lex Friedman podcast, and he said that trust would return to this relationship soon. Beijing agreed.
Being partners in mutual success and making the dragon and elephant dance together is the only correct choice for China and India. China is willing to work with India to thoroughly implement the important consensus reached by the leaders of the two countries.
So India and China want to work together, but the old challenges remain. Let's take the example of trade. China's ambassador to India spoke about this today. His name is Xu Feihong. He said China is ready to buy more Indian goods. He suggested that both countries should close the trade gap. Total bilateral trade between India and China is worth more than $100 billion, but it is tilted in China's favor. The deficit is a staggering $85 billion. In 2024, India exported goods worth over just $16 billion. How can this be increased? There has been a lot of back and forth, a flurry of engagements. Indian officials have traveled to Beijing, but what is the outcome? China is yet to reduce trade barriers on India. Indian exporters face major restrictions spanning multiple sectors and products, including pharmaceuticals, basmati rice, and bovine meat. These barriers are not new. They were in place even before the clashes in Galwan. So China wants to buy more Indian goods. And if it wants to do this, it should start by leveling the playing field. It should meet India halfway on all points of contention and all outstanding issues, like border management, river cooperation, resuming pilgrimages, easing of investment rules, reopening direct flights, and lifting app bans. There's a lot of ground to cover and little progress. Here's what India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said.
What happened in 2020 was actually very traumatic for the relationship. It wasn't just the bloodshed, it was the disregard of written agreements. Because this isn't a gray area we are talking about. Through this period, obviously it took us, we're still dealing with some parts of this. So it's not like the issue has completely gone away. But we also felt that the way forward was to find a negotiated outcome, and that's what we've been trying to do since 2020.
So while both sides have expressed intent, we are far from a real reset, even on the border. While the troops have been pulled back, and that's a major development given how things were before, the larger boundary issue remains unresolved. Long story short, for all the talk of mutual trust, China has shown little interest in addressing the fundamental problems. Xi Jinping's desire for cooperation is convenient. There may even be synergies on paper, but in practice, mutual distrust runs deep. So the Chinese president's outreach is not a reset, it is a reaction, driven by pressure from Trump's tariffs. This letter is not a diplomatic breakthrough, it is diplomacy under stress.
It's a liberation of this country. India is one of the highest tariffing nations in the world. I think you're going to have a country that's going to boom.
The clock is ticking. The deadline is tomorrow, the 2nd of April. In less than 24 hours from now, Donald Trump's new tariffs would kick in. Before the deadline, the president is softening his tone. He says it may not be as bad as people expect.
Are you concerned that this move of the tariffs this week could push some of the United States' closest allies to work with China?
No, I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it. Yeah.
Mr. President, can I ask you
I
about
think
something?
they have a chance of doing better, actually, with the tariffs. It can actually help them in a certain way. If you look at the European Union on cars, the European Union already dropped their tariff down to 2.5%. It was announced a couple of days ago, which is what which is a very small tariff. The United States charged very little. And I think I heard that India just a little while ago is going to be dropping its tariffs very substantially. And I said, why didn't somebody do this a long time ago?
Will the tariffs push America's allies towards China? Trump does not think so. He also believes that India will lower its tariffs. Normally, such remarks would calm the markets. But with Donald Trump in the White House, investors are not taking any chances. Markets around the world have crashed, including Indian stocks. It was a complete bloodbath today. Investors in India lost about 3 lakh crore rupees in a day. That's over $35 billion gone in today's trade. In the US, markets have fared much worse. The sell-off began in February in America, and it has not stopped. Their losses have crossed $5 trillion. To call the situation bad would be an understatement. Trump's tariffs will have a sweeping impact. And stock markets are just one part of the equation. Overall, the global economy will bear the brunt of these tariffs. Total losses could cross $1.4 trillion. That is the scale of damage. Experts are quite worried about the fallout because Trump's plan remains vague. It is missing a lot of specifics. Like, how will the plan be implemented? Will there be a blanket tariff rate on all countries, or will Trump pick and choose specific imports? The US president's own team sounds clueless. Listen to his press secretary.
If you look at the unfair trade practices that we have, 50% from the European Union on American dairy. You have a 700% tariff from Japan on American rice. You have a 100% tariff from India on American agricultural products. You have nearly a 300% tariff from Canada on American butter and American cheese. This makes it virtually impossible for American products to be imported into these markets. And it has put a lot of Americans out of business and out of work over the past several decades. So it's time for reciprocity.
She's criticizing India's tariffs and calling for full reciprocity, which, by the way, contradicts Trump's own demands. Because the US president has hinted at a potential deal with India. He said New Delhi is lowering tariffs. So what is the plan? Trump says he has finalized one. He has a final plan, but he won't reveal it until tomorrow. His trade officials have offered some clues, though. They have released a report, an assessment of foreign trade barriers. The US has trade arrangements with 20 countries, and from the looks of it, they will top the list of Trump's targets. This list includes partners like China, Canada, the European Union, South Korea, Mexico, Japan, Vietnam, and India. These are some of America's biggest suppliers, and this report dedicates a section to each of them. What does it say about India? It highlights the high tax rates, the 50% tariff on apples, corn and motorcycles, and the 100% import tax on coffee, raisins and walnuts. This is what India imposes on American goods. Beyond this, the US has raised other complaints like regulatory hurdles, the need for licenses and approvals, quotas and other requirements, price caps and subsidies. In fact, on this front, there is a specific mention of farm subsidies. And this has been a long-standing point of friction. India's tariffs on farm goods and the subsidies to Indian farmers. Trump's team wants lower barriers. They want what they call a level playing field for American imports. And this is a very sensitive topic, politically, economically, and strategically, because these protections are critical for India's own food security and for the livelihood of India's farmers. Agriculture still employs the highest number of Indians. India's economy depends on this sector. 14% of India's GDP and 13% of India's exports come from agriculture. So India here faces a very tough balancing act. What happens if Trump pulls the trigger? What if he imposes sweeping tariffs across the board? Countries around the world are bracing for impact and working on their response. China, Japan, and South Korea have joined hands. They say they will respond to Trump's tariffs together. The European Union is threatening retaliatory tariffs, and if Trump leaves no room for compromise, India too will have to respond. During the Second World War, American soldiers were stationed in Italy. They craved coffee, but the local espresso was too strong. It was bitter for their palates. So these soldiers came up with a hack. They would dilute it with hot water. The new drink was milder and similar to the coffee that they drank back at home. This became known as Cafe Americano, or the Americano coffee that we know today. It's available all over the world, but not in Canada. After Trump's tariffs, they've given the Americano a new name. It's now the Canadiano.
It's been a really interesting kind of shift to have more people ordering a Canadiano, making a point to say Canadiano. I think the reception has in general been very positive.
I don't usually drink Americano coffee, but I just saw it on the board and I went, hey, this is something that's cool and I'm going to support Canada and have a Canadiano.
Shows you the effects that Trump's tariffs have had. At first, the signs were subtle. A Danish grocery store displaying a sign that says, buy local. A French boutique quietly swapping out Levi's jeans. Canadian markets removing American bourbon from their shelves and renaming the Americano coffee. Then the hashtags emerged. Boycott USA, boycott American goods, buy made in America. And before you could blink, there's a full-scale boycott. Tesla, Coca-Cola, Pringles, McDonald's, even good old Netflix. American goods are suddenly the ultimate taboo. They're off the shelves, and they're off people's shopping and wish lists.
Year, the LCBO sells nearly $1 billion worth of U.S. wine, beer, cider, seltzers, and spirits, including more than 3,600 products from 35 states. As of today, every single one of these products is off the shelves.
The latest country to join is Denmark. It controls Greenland. Trump wants to take over the territory, Greenland, and that has sparked a lot of anger. Supermarkets in Denmark are promoting homegrown goods. There are apps for customers. Ironically, a lot of them American apps. They can find out where the produce originates. Facebook groups have come up. They offer tips on how to avoid US goods.
Well, people has been wanting to buy European goods. Obviously, with geopolitics going on at the moment, I guess you can guess yourself why. Basically, we want to sell products from all over the world, but of course, we at the same time want to help our customers as much as possible. And here, the specific ask from a lot of customers has been, we would like to buy European goods, and therefore we are now helping them with guiding them in the store with a black star.
On Google, which is also American, boycott USA is a top trend. And leading this trend are 5 countries: Denmark, Canada, France, Switzerland, and Sweden. Last month, there was a survey in Canada. People were asked about US goods. 85% planned to replace them. Many said they'd already done so. So the sentiment is the same everywhere, and this is impacting American goods and brands, especially Tesla. That's the company of Trump's first buddy, Elon Musk. Tomorrow, Tesla is set to release its quarterly report, essentially its sales numbers, and investors are bracing for a dip. The forecast is between 355,000 to 360,000 models sold, which is a 7% dip from the same period last year. In Europe, Tesla sales have dropped by 49% in the first 2 months of this year. This is despite the electric vehicle market growing. Tesla stores are also being vandalized in many countries. The signs are not good, and at the center of all of it is one man, Donald Trump. His trade wars were supposed to strengthen American manufacturing, but they mostly triggered retaliatory tariffs and international resentment. Trump, of course, is undeterred, but can America afford this war? This is not the first time the world has weaponized its wallets. Boycotts have long existed. They show how consumer activism can cause real change. At the same time, not all boycotts stick. So can Boycott USA push Trump to change his policy? I guess that depends on how long consumers hold the line. Right now, American businesses are feeling the pinch. Their challenge is clear. They must adapt or suffer the consequences. So some will rebrand, others will double down on domestic markets, banking on the idea that international resentment will fade.
Well, certainly we're very concerned about the tariffs, increased costs that are already going to be tapping into already tight margins, and certainly the impact on our customers. Who's going to pay $75 for what was a $25 bottle of wine?
The biggest takeaway? Consumers are more politically engaged than ever. This is a world where your shopping cart can be a political statement. So brands are under scrutiny like never before. And if this boycott continues to gain traction, US businesses might have to face a sobering reality. Sometimes the biggest trade war is not fought with tariffs. It is fought in the checkout aisle. Let's turn to Ukraine now, which is bracing for a new onslaught. They have steadily lost territory since this year began, but chances are it could get worse because President Putin is going for the jugular. He has launched a new recruitment drive today. The plan is to draft 160,000 men into the Russian army, another 160,000 men to join the army. Now, this is a massive build-up. It is Russia's biggest conscription since 2011. All Russian men between the age of 18 and 30 can be drafted. They will have to serve for 1 year. And where will they serve? Typically away from the front line because Russia leaves the fighting to train soldiers. So these new recruits are mostly backups. Nonetheless, the timing is very significant. The US and Ukraine are trying to force Putin into a ceasefire. And what does Putin do? He announces a massive military recruitment drive. It's a very clear message for Moscow. Pressure will not work. A message from Moscow, rather, that pressure will not work. The war will only end on Putin's terms. But President Donald Trump is still hopeful. He says Putin will live up to his promise.
I think he's going to live up to what he told me, and I think he's going to fulfill his part of the deal. Now, then you have Zelensky, and hopefully he's going to live up. I see he's trying to renegotiate the rare earth.
And what about Ukraine? President Zelensky predicted this last week. He said Russia was planning new operations in Sumy, in Kharkiv, and in Zaporizhia. He said Putin's plan is to drag out the peace talks to gain as much land as possible. European countries also share this assessment. Their top diplomats met in Madrid yesterday. They were joined by the UK's foreign minister, and all of them had two demands. One, if Russia is serious about peace, it should accept a ceasefire. And two, the US must put pressure on Russia.
A few weeks ago, Ukraine agreed on an unconditional ceasefire, whilst Russia keeps perpetrating war crimes, and I say this on the 3rd anniversary of the Bucha massacre. And I believe Russia today owes the United States of America, who have committed to reaching a ceasefire, a clear answer on whether it wants to go on the path of peace path, yes or no.
De cheminer vers la paix, c'est oui ou c'est non.
So Europe is calling out Russia. They are saying, give us a clear answer. Do you want a ceasefire or not? Well, Putin already gave his response last month. It wasn't a yes or a no, it was a maybe. You see, Russia has all the battlefield advantage at the moment, and they will want the truce to reflect that, to give them concessions. But Ukraine and Europe are unwilling to accept that. They want to give guarantees and recover lost Ukrainian land, both of which are non-starters for Moscow. So how can we break this deadlock? Trump is trying from his end, but could there be pressure from another end? Perhaps from China. I ask because the Chinese foreign minister is in Moscow, Wang Yi. He's on a 3-day trip to Russia, and he had held 2 key meetings today. First, with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, and then with President Putin. In Moscow, Wang Yi spoke to the Russian media. He talked about the ongoing peace talks. Let me quote from what he said. The step towards peace, although not that big, is constructive. It's worth building on it. With peace, it is no pain, no gain. You need to work hard to achieve it. Now, this has largely been China's position. Yes, we need peace in Ukraine, but we must acknowledge Russia's concerns, which is exactly what Trump is doing. But will President Xi go that extra mile? Will he ask Putin to take a ceasefire? Trump was certainly hopeful of it. In February, he admitted that China has a great deal of influence over Putin. He also urged Beijing to persuade Moscow. Listen to this.
Hopefully, China can help us stop the war with, in particular, Russia, Ukraine. They have a great deal of power over that situation. And we'll work with them. And I mentioned that during our phone conversation with President Xi. And hopefully we could work together and get that stopped.
Does China have the leverage? Their trade with Russia stands at $224 billion. China is Russia's largest trading partner. It has been for 14 years now. Plus, China gives a lot of dual-use goods to Russia. Dual-use goods are things that have both military and civilian use. So in short, yes, China does have the leverage. But does it also have the political will? This question is a lot tougher to answer. If China can persuade Putin, they will have Donald Trump's gratitude. It's worth a lot right now because Trump has launched a trade war with China. So Beijing would love a change in fortunes, to be in Trump's good books. Having said that, there is a downside too. If this war ends, US-Russia ties will improve considerably, and Trump has been quite open about this. He wants to deepen relations with Moscow. At the same time, he wants to break up the Russia-China axis. So it's a tough call for Beijing. Yes, they would like to see the war end. It would open up supply chains and energy markets. But do they have sufficient confidence in their ties with Moscow? Can it survive Trump's reset with Russia? In today's meeting, Wang Yi projected confidence. He said China and Russia would not tolerate interference from outside. He said their ties are not against a third country. Let's see if this confidence allows Beijing to push Vladimir Putin. China launches military drills around Taiwanese islands. This is a headline that you've seen in the past as Vladimir Putin prepares for war. His no-limits friend Xi Jinping is taking notes and doing what he's done in the past. They've launched extensive military drills today. Hundreds of warships and aircraft were deployed. Beijing's agenda? A blockade of Taiwan, both in the air and the sea. Hundreds of Chinese warships surrounded the island. Fighter jets violated Taiwan's airspace, and these drills were done for one purpose: to send a message to Taiwan. China has called it combat readiness. Its Eastern Command said, and I paraphrase, Chinese armed forces will close in on the self-governing island from multiple directions and practice assault on ground targets and blockade of sea lanes. Now, this is a threat, and the military deployment added to the optics. So did Taiwan hunker down? Not really. It responded to the Chinese provocation. Taiwan launched jets and warships to counter the Chinese deployment. Taiwan's defense minister addressed the country, and he called China a troublemaker. He took potshots at Beijing by highlighting corruption in their military. Listen to this.
It is obviously that China is a very obvious troublemaker. There have been a lot of reports related to corruption problems within the People's Liberation Army. I think they should properly resolve these internal problems instead of destroying peace and stability in the region.
Now, Chinese drills around Taiwan are not new. In fact, they happen quite often. Taiwan is used to the provocation. They were prepared this time as well. So China was forced to change tactics. Beijing unleashed a different weapon, one that they're quite proud of, their propaganda. Like I said, China was practicing a blockade of Taiwan. Warships and jets surrounded the island, but Taiwan responded. So China took the fight to a different battlefield: social media. Beijing released an animated video. You can see it here. It shows Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te as an insect. China labeled President Lai as a parasite who was poisoning Taiwan. And the cheap theatrics did not end there. The animation ended with this: Chinese jets and ships surrounding Taiwan, and President Lai caught by chopsticks while being roasted on fire. That's the world's second largest economic power for you, masters of gunboat diplomacy and online bullying. China has often called President Lai a separatist, but now they're calling him a parasite. What triggered this animated fury? Two developments, both linked to the United States. The first is U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. He recently visited the Philippines and Japan. It was his first visit to Asia. He publicly condemned Chinese aggression in the Taiwan Strait. This happened on Sunday in Tokyo. We told you about this. And this has upset China, which is why they're acting up. Here's the second reason: weapons. Right before Pete Hegseth's visit to the Indo-Pacific, the Trump administration delivered something to Taiwan. And it was no ordinary weapon. It was the most advanced and lethal version of the F-16 fighter jets. Unlike the F-16 jets that Taiwan already operates, this one is modern with better anti-maritime capabilities. Taiwan will get 66 such jets. The first ones were delivered last weekend. It is a major boost to their offensive capabilities. And do you know who approved the sale? US President Donald Trump. This deal, in fact, was approved in 2019 when Trump was president. Then came the Biden administration. They delayed the deliveries. Now Trump is back in the White House and the deliveries are back on track. The first batch has been sent to Taiwan. Plus, Trump is ramping up support in other ways. In February, the US State Department removed a line from its website which said that the US does not support Taiwan's independence. This was the line. They removed it. And then new F-16 jets were delivered. If you join the dots, you will see a furious China. It opposes all American support for Taiwan, and this could be one reason for the latest drills. But what about the animation? The propaganda video screams desperation. For a country that takes pride in its technology and AI advancements, you would at least expect better graphics. To West Asia now, where a new conflict is brewing. This one features Egypt. Reports say Egypt is increasing its military buildup in an area called the Sinai Peninsula. This is Egyptian land bordering Israel. Israel says it is monitoring the development. According to Israeli reports, Egypt has deployed thousands of troops to the Sinai. It is extending runways in the peninsula. It is also expanding naval docks. If true, this could have serious consequences for the region, not to mention for Egypt-Israel relations. Because the Sinai Peninsula is strategically located, historically it has been a point of friction. Let me show you a map. The Sinai is a land bridge between Africa and Asia. It connects Egypt and Israel. The Mediterranean Sea lies to the north, the Red Sea to the south, and tucked in the peninsula's west is the Suez Canal. Thousands of ships pass through here every year. The Sinai is Egyptian territory, but it has a troubled past. It has been controlled by several empires, starting with the ancient Egyptians, then the Romans, then came the Ottoman Empire and the British Empire. It was only in 1922 that Egypt regained control. 1922, that's when Egypt also gained independence from the British. And since then, the Sinai has been Egyptian territory. Now they're said to be deploying military here on what is technically their own land. So why is Israel flagging this buildup? Because of an old treaty signed between Israel and Egypt. Time for a quick history lesson again. The year is 1956. The Suez is a strategic asset. Egypt decides to nationalize the Suez Canal. The Europeans do not like it, especially the British and the French. Egypt blocks ships from using the waterway. Israel launches an attack. Britain and France support it, and Egypt loses control of the Sinai. That's when the US and Soviet Russia enter the picture. They force an Israeli withdrawal and they create a buffer zone. All of this happened in 1956. But the tensions lingered. Then in 1967, Egypt reclaimed the Sinai. This triggered another war, the Six-Day War. Israel attacked Egypt, Syria, and Jordan and took back the Sinai. But Egypt was not done. It launched another offensive in 1973. Fighting continued for several months. Finally, there was a ceasefire in 1975, and 4 years later, the United States stepped in. It brokered a peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. That's what we call the Camp David Accords. They were signed in 1979. This ended the hostilities. Israel agreed to completely withdraw from the Sinai. In return, Egypt set up formal relations with Israel. It has been 46 years since the Camp David Accords. The region has seen many wars in between, but the Sinai has been mostly out of it. In recent years, though, it's been on the edge. Egypt has battled multiple insurgencies in this peninsula. ISIS and Al-Qaeda once operated in big numbers here. They were eventually defeated with Israeli help. And that brings us to today. Israel's war in Gaza is adding to the pressure. Sinai is vital for sending aid into Gaza, but Israel's war on Hamas continues. Israeli troops remain deployed at the Rafah crossing. This borders the Sinai. Perhaps Egypt is preparing for a fallout in Gaza, like a mass exodus, or Hamas crossing into Egypt through underground tunnels. This would explain Egypt's military deployment, but Israel sees this as a violation of the peace treaty. The treaty allows Egyptian soldiers only up to a point in the Sinai, and even the movement of Egyptian forces is restricted. Now, Israel claims that Egypt is violating this pact. Israeli officials have flagged the breach with the Americans. The US enforces this treaty. Egypt is yet to comment. It is not clear if the treaty has indeed been violated, but it is amply clear that another war is the last thing that this region needs. Britain has found a new bogeyman, something to blame for its own failures. Hindu extremism. That's right. British police have prepared a new intelligence report. It focuses on extremism in Britain. Parts of that report have been leaked to the British press, and 3 claims stand out. Number 1, British Hindu extremists are aligning with the far right. Their shared belief? Apparently hatred for Muslims. The report says Hindu extremists met a far-right British activist. His name is Tommy Robinson, and he's currently in jail. That's point number one, highlight number one. Number two, Hindu allies of Prime Minister Narendra Modi are meddling in British elections. Apparently, they campaigned against Labour in 2019. And finally, highlight number three, European terrorists are taking inspiration from Hindu extremists. The report gives the example of Anders Breivik. He killed 77 people in Norway in 2011. Apparently, he found Hindu extremism appealing. These are the three big claims made in this report. It says Hindu extremists are trying to disrupt social harmony in the UK. That they will worsen ties between Hindus and other communities like Sikhs and Muslims. British Hindu groups have hit back at this report. They're calling these claims baseless, misleading, and false. And remember, this is just a leak. Chances are the full report could be worse, which is why some lawmakers want it released. They want to scrutinize the findings.
Into the Leicester riots of 2022, blaming Hindu extremism, despite the fact that during those riots, 105 Hindu homes were attacked, no Muslim homes, 2 Hindu temples were attacked, but no mosques. So could the Minister actually ensure that this report is published so we can actually scrutinise it and make sure that the blame is put where it should be?
Let's take a step back here. Why is Britain blaming so-called Hindu extremism? The first time they did this was in 2022 during the Leicester riots that the MP just spoke about. British Hindus and Muslims clashed in August and September that year. Later, government reports named Hindu extremism as a factor. I guess that was just the start, because this report goes even further. It is blaming Hindus for inspiring European terrorists, of conspiring with the far right, and of meddling in elections. Now, these are very serious allegations to make. Let's see if the UK government can back it up with proof. If not, let's see if they apologise. But for the moment, let's focus on the bigger picture. Britain's social issues are not new. The UK has always been an unfair, discriminatory society. Don't take our word for it. Look at studies conducted in Britain. 29% of minorities face discrimination in education. A similar number reported issues at work, plus more than 20% face discrimination from British police. Hindus are not the perpetrators here. They are among the victims. Yet who does the report blame? So-called Hindu extremists. The fact is, Britain has not been able to curb religious and racial hatred. That's their government's failure. There is no point blaming Hindus or India for it. And some of the claims are laughable. For instance, the report says supporters of Prime Minister Modi sent WhatsApp messages to British Hindus, saying what? Don't vote for the Labour Party. Apparently, this is proof of election meddling. Just think about the hypocrisy. British Khalistanis organize referendums to break up India. They target Indian diplomatic missions and vehicles, yet that is called freedom of expression. But alleged WhatsApp messages? Well, that's a strict no. And this is just one example. You may remember the grooming gangs of Britain. These were British Pakistanis luring and abusing young white girls. For years, British police did not crack down on them. Do you know why? Because they feared racial tensions. Even now they say, don't focus on race or religion, focus on the crime. Yet the same British police are openly talking about Hindu extremism. What happened to not focusing on religion? What happened to focusing on the crime? Clearly, this report needs to be studied more. Yes, every community will have bad eggs, but it's important not to generalize, not unless you have solid proof. Britain should instead focus on healing its social divisions, on curbing hate crimes and discrimination. It's always easy to blame the bogeyman. It's much harder to admit your own mistakes. It's not every day that a company attracts a $40 billion investment, but OpenAI has done it. That's the company behind ChatGPT. It has secured $40 billion in a new funding round, which was led by Japan's SoftBank. This was the largest funding round for a private tech company in history, the largest ever, and it raises OpenAI's valuation to $300 billion. So what explains this record funding round? It is for a seemingly intangible idea, something called artificial superintelligence. That's what OpenAI wants to achieve. And that is what SoftBank is betting on. So what exactly is artificial superintelligence? Is it really worth all the money and the hype? Our next report tells you.
OpenAI, they're the folks behind ChatGPT, the AI that can help you write essays, giblify your images, and even play the role of a BFF/therapist. The company has just raised $40 billion in one investment round. It's pushed OpenAI's valuation to $300 billion. This is the largest funding round for a private tech company in history. This investment round was led by Japan's SoftBank, but they have some conditions. OpenAI will currently receive $10 billion, but the remaining $30 billion will only come at the end of the year. That too, if OpenAI becomes a for-profit company. Only then will it get this money. So the funding comes with restructuring conditions. But what exactly is this staggering amount of money for? Is SoftBank just throwing cash at AI? Well, not according to Group CEO Masayoshi Son. He's hedging his bets on something bigger. Artificial Superintelligence or ASI. Masayoshi Son believes ASI will exist by 2035, and he thinks OpenAI is the partner that's closest to achieving that goal. What about Sam Altman? Well, the OpenAI CEO is even more optimistic. He says artificial superintelligence is just a few thousand days away, and he's confident OpenAI will get there. So what exactly is artificial superintelligence? Today, AI is broadly characterized into three categories. First, artificial narrow intelligence, where the system is given one task and it does just that. Think appliances, self-driving cars, streaming apps, or even healthcare. We give the machine a task and they do it. Basically, the rudimentary stages of artificial intelligence. Then comes the second stage, artificial general intelligence. This is where AI can rival humans. They can do multiple things at the same time. Many call ChatGPT a step towards artificial general intelligence.
Hello, I'm Mika, the world's first experimental AI.
And then we have the third stage. This is where things can get a little scary. It's called artificial superintelligence. Basically, machines go beyond human intelligence. They have a mind of their own. According to Masayoshi Son, they will be 10,000 times smarter than a human brain. Remember all those sci-fi movies with the villain robot? This is that stage, or so we're told. If you're getting flashbacks of robot uprisings, don't worry, you're not alone. It does sound a lot like the plot of Terminator. But are the robots really coming for us? The truth is, narrow AI is still a long way from becoming super intelligent. Artificial General Intelligence, or AGI, is the next step, and that is still in the works. It would be able to learn and perform tasks just like a human, but that's still far from becoming the brain of a super intelligent machine. So your Roomba is not about to stage a revolution, at least not anytime soon. So is all this money just creating an AI bubble? Well, inflation valuations are a problem, especially in the Silicon Valley. But this isn't just a bubble. Artificial intelligence is already transforming industries. Yes, we're still in the early stages, but the progress is so fast that it's hard to ignore. The fact is, AI is already part of our daily lives. It's just going to keep getting better, faster, and smarter. Will it be perfect? Probably not. Will it change everything? Absolutely. But are we ready? That's the question to ponder upon. Because according to Silicon Valley, ASI is coming and it just might be smarter than us. Let's just hope it likes humans enough to let us keep the internet password.
I'm sure you're familiar with Jordan. It's a country in West Asia, home to more than 11 million people. Jordan also has a standing army of more than 100,000 soldiers. I know what you're thinking. Why this crash course on Jordan? Well, Jordan's GDP is just above $50 billion, which is less than what our story's main character is worth. I'm talking about America's Harvard University. It is worth $53 billion. 53 billion, that's more than the GDP of 120 countries. Every year, Harvard's pile keeps growing, but President Donald Trump could be putting a stop to it. He is reviewing government funding to Harvard. How much money are we talking about here? Around $9 billion. That's $8.7 billion in grants and around $255 million in contracts. Harvard University was supposed to get this money over the next couple of years, but Donald Trump has paused it. Why? Because of Harvard's response to Gaza protests. Trump says the university did not crack down on anti-Semitism, that Jewish students were targeted by protesters, hence the decision to review the funding. Trump did the same to Columbia University as well. He withheld $400 million in federal funding. Next thing you know, Columbia changed its policy. Now, we'll stay away from the politics for now. Instead, we'll focus on the money. How did Harvard University end up with $53 billion? Why did it need another $9 billion? And where will this money go? Where does this money go? When we say Harvard has $53 billion, we're talking about the Harvard Endowment. Think of it as a funding pool. Every donation in the university's history, every gift, every check, all of it goes to this endowment. Harvard then invests this money in different places, like in stocks, private equity, or hedge funds. And the returns? Well, that is used to run the colleges. These returns make up 1/3 of Harvard's expenses. What about the rest? Well, that comes from other sources like federal funding and tuition fees. Look at last year's split. Harvard's total expenses came to $6.4 billion. Out of this, $2.4 billion came from the endowment and the rest from grants and fees. So let me recap. Harvard University is sitting on $53 billion. It is making billions from this fund every year, yet it was slated to receive $9 billion more. $9 billion of American taxpayers' money. Where exactly does it go? One expense is financial aid. Harvard has almost 25,000 students. Around 55% of them get some sort of financial assistance. Another expense is salaries. This university has more than 20,000 faculty and staff. They're some of the best in the world, which means they're highly paid. Then you have upkeep and capital expenses. Harvard has multiple buildings, libraries, and museums. It also sits on a massive parcel of land, almost 5,000 acres in size, so clearly maintenance will be expensive. And finally, we have research. Harvard conducts dozens of studies and experiments every year. They cover fields like medicine and technology, and this is where federal funding comes in. So the US government wants to study, say the US government wants to study certain diseases or to weaponize certain technology, which they do all the time, then they will ask Harvard to carry out the research. In return, the university gets money. Last year, the US government paid Harvard $686 million. Nearly $500 million came from just one agency, the National Institutes of Health, NIH. And over $50 million came from the Pentagon, the American Defense Ministry. Obviously, a lot of this money is used for the actual research, to buy machines and to pay researchers, but sometimes the money is also misused. That's what happened at Stanford in 1991. Government money was used to repair the sailing team's yacht. It was even used to upgrade the university president's closet and pay for his laundry. It tells you what the downside is. Yes, the money contributes to cutting-edge research, but the oversight is lacking. And that's just one problem here. The sheer size of this funding is also problematic. $9 billion is a lot of money. Fun fact, it is equal to all of Afghanistan's central bank assets. Assets that are frozen in America. How can such a bloated budget be justified, especially in a country like the US? Around 2/3 of American adults do not have a college degree. Almost 42 million Americans have student debt, 42 million. Yet the government is giving billions to elite colleges, colleges that are unthinkable for most Americans. How can this be justified? Supporters say Harvard has a multiplier effect. Say you spend $1 on research, that research could lead to medical or technological breakthroughs, thus saving many more lives and dollars. So supporters say it's worth it. But critics say it's not. They want this money to be spent more widely on schools, on student loans, and on community colleges. The fact is, US college funding did need a review. If not for anti-Semitism, then certainly for wasteful spending. We live in a world that looks very different for kids today than it did for their parents. This month, the hit Netflix series Adolescence captured this very difference. If you watched the show, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, let me give you a preview. In one episode, a detective is investigating why a 13-year-old boy killed his female classmate. He tracks their Instagram interactions. Based on it, he assumes that these two children were friendly. That is, until his son, who's a teenager himself, tells the detective that he's got it all wrong. The emojis shared between the teenagers seemed innocuous, but they were actually a coded form of bullying. This is a dizzying realization for the detective and for the viewers of the series, and this disconnect is central to Adolescence. This is a hard-hitting drama. It shows the aftermath of the stabbing of a teenage girl in the UK. It shines light on the corrosive impact of social media. It explores how the ideas of online influencers, like the self-described misogynist Andrew Tate, shaped the views of children hooked onto their phones. It also talks about the impact of the so-called manosphere. This includes online forums that oppose feminism and promote sexism. So the show explores a range of interconnected issues, and it has gripped the world. It has attracted 66 million viewers the world over. That's about the population of France. Within its first week of release, Adolescence made history in the UK with about 6.5 million viewers. The series has sparked a global conversation. Even the British Prime Minister is talking about it.
I mean, it's incredible. And it holds you there for four, frankly, at times harrowing episodes. And I have to be honest, as a dad, I have not found it easy viewing. We've been watching it with our children. My girl is 14, my boy is 16, and it's been really hard to watch.
It may be hard to watch, but Netflix has made an announcement. The drama will be aired across schools in the UK. Children in secondary schools will be able to watch it for free, and Keir Starmer has backed this decision. After all, Adolescence is not about one fictional, innocent-looking boy who was driven to do something horrific. It shows what happened in the series could happen anywhere. It is, in fact, happening anywhere and everywhere. Here are some headlines from last year. A 17-year-old stabbed 3 little girls dead at a dance class in the UK. 2 teenage boys were stabbed to death, and the murderer gloated about it on social media. 2 15-year-olds were arrested for killing a teenager by stabbing her 28 times. There are hundreds of cases like these, and not just in the UK. From Albania to India, it is happening everywhere. The question is why? And the answer is not straightforward. But part of the problem is isolation. Children are increasingly becoming lonely. About a third of them are lonely the world over. Mental health cases are on the rise, so children are no longer safe in their own rooms. As they peer at screens, forces exploit their vulnerability.
The devastating effect of misogyny on our society, very powerful. The dangers of online radicalisation and this sense of young people being on their own, very often in their bedroom or wherever, isolated with that online radicalisation.
Children are impressionable. What they see is what they learn. Unfortunately, in today's world, this means content on the internet which is often hateful, violent and sexist. According to a poll in the UK, 80% of 16 and 17-year-old boys consume content by Andrew Tate. In contrast, only 60% have heard of their own Prime Minister. This may sound appalling, but 56% of young fathers approve of Andrew Tate. Now, to give you context, this is the same man who has gone viral with his rants about male dominance. He has openly advocated violence against women. He has been banned from every major social media platform, and yet his ideas have taken root in the minds of countless children, even boys as young as 5. So when impressions are made at such a young age, we know what comes next. Deep fake porn of girls made by their classmates, cyberbullying, misogynistic chants by children, and sexism across schools spurred by social media. It is like a horror show, and children everywhere are at risk. But there is no silver bullet to fix this. Like we said, this is not one problem. This is a broad cultural issue. It is about how society views women. It is about the sheer lack of regulation. It is about playing catch up with technology. This is a problem that needs both awareness and policy change. A TV show has taken care of the first part. There is awareness. Policymakers can talk about it. But it's about time that they take up the baton and do the work. We're doing a small experiment tonight. It is part of our new interactive news service. If you're watching us on your TV, raise up your right hand. If you're watching on your phone, I want you to raise your left hand. Done? Well, congratulations. It's April 1st, aka Fool's Day. Don't worry, you fell for it. If you fell for it, today is all about pranking and being pranked, the day you can get away with just about anything. Just don't forget to say April Fools afterwards. And it's not just us. The whole internet is celebrating. Take a look at this.
I don't know what's gonna happen. Ugh. I don't know what I'm gonna do.
We're all gonna put down on
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Myanmar, rescuers pull out a survivor who was stuck under the rubble for 91 hours. In Iceland, a volcano erupts, forcing tourists and residents to evacuate. And a Bitcoin investor buys an entire SpaceX flight to fly over the North and South Poles. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 2004, Google launched its email service, Gmail. Many believed it was an April Fool's Day prank. At the time, email providers like Yahoo and Hotmail offered only a few megabytes of storage, but Google promised 1 GB. It seemed too good to be true. Today, Gmail has nearly 2 billion users. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Giá nhiều khẩu video của nó là giá nhiều